If you are still waiting for a big moment to change your life, you may have missed the most important truth. Life does not fall apart in one day, and it is not rebuilt by one explosive decision. It is shaped by very small choices repeated when no one is watching. Maybe you are not lazy, maybe you are not weak, maybe you are simply living inside a structure that is quietly pulling you in the wrong direction. And if you do not stop right now to honestly look at how you are living 1 year from now, you will still be in the same place, only more tired and with less belief. This video does not offer empty motivation. It takes you on a journey straight to the root, where you understand why you are stuck. And the only way out does not require miracles or perfection. It only requires that you show up in the right way each day. If you feel that it is time to live differently, then stay, because what comes next may change the entire trajectory of your life. You wake up each morning not because you have a clear purpose, but because habit pulls you out of bed. You reach for your phone before you are truly present in your own life. You allow the news stream, other people's emotions and urgent tasks to decide the rhythm of your day. The day passes quickly but feels empty, and by night you are tired, not because you lived fully but because you were dragged along for too long. This is not your fault. This is the common state of adults trying to survive in a world that constantly demands more, while giving very little space to stop and ask where they are going. The problem is that when you live long enough on autopilot, you begin to believe that this is who you truly are. You think you are undisciplined, unmotivated, unfocused, but the truth is deeper and far more dangerous. You are not lacking strength. You are asleep inside a system of living that you did not design. And when a person sleeps for too long, they do not lose their potential. They lose their sense of agency. Awakening does not come from a major event. It arrives quietly. It is the moment you realize you have been reacting to life more than leading it. It is when you begin to feel uncomfortable with your own familiar stagnation. That discomfort is not a sign of weakness. It is the first signal of awareness. Because only when a part of you is still alive does it resist being pulled along unconsciously. The first gate of this journey does not ask you to change everything immediately. It only asks you to be honest. Honest that the way you are living is not the way you want to live. Honest that you have handed too much decision-making power to circumstances, old habits, and small distractions repeated every day. When you admit this quietly and without self-blame, you are standing before the gate. This gate is not loud or dramatic. It opens to a single simple question, powerful enough to shake the entire old system. If you continue living as you are now, who will you become 1 year from today? This question is not meant to scare you. It is meant to wake you up, because time does not stop to wait for you to be ready. It keeps moving, and it will carry you in the direction your habits have already chosen. This moment is when you pause within that current. You do not need to see the entire road ahead. You only need to know that you do not want to keep drifting. And from this very brief pause, the real journey begins. The reason you do not change is not that you lack determination or ability, but that you are trapped inside a life loop repeated for so long it has become normal. Every day you wake up with the same rhythm, the same chain of reactions, the same way of dealing with pressure, and over time your brain learns that this state is safe. Safe does not mean good. Safe only means familiar. The human brain is programmed to conserve energy and avoid risk, so it will always prioritize keeping you inside familiar behaviors, even when those behaviors are making you tired and dissatisfied. When you procrastinate, when you choose the easy path, when you scroll past uncomfortable feelings instead of sitting with them, your brain records that avoidance is the right choice. And when that choice is repeated enough times, it is no longer a behavior, it becomes an identity. You begin to describe yourself as undisciplined, as someone who gives up, as someone who is not persistent enough. But you do not realize those labels are not innate truths. They are the product of hundreds of small unconscious choices. The original fracture is that you have unknowingly let habits decide who you become instead of you deciding your habits. No one taught you how to design a life with intention. You grew up learning how to react, how to cope, how to adapt, but rarely how to lead yourself. So, when life becomes more complex, when responsibilities pile up, when your energy declines, you do not fail because you are weak, but because you are using an old system for a new stage of life. This is why so many intelligent, well-meaning people with dreams still feel stuck. They try harder, but inside the same structure. They force themselves to change with short-term motivation, while their environment, habits, and daily rhythm keep pulling them back to the starting point. Each time it happens, your belief in yourself is eroded a little more. You begin to doubt yourself. You think something is wrong inside you, but the truth is, nothing is wrong with you at all. What needs fixing is not who you are, but the system you are living in. This fracture is dangerous because it is invisible. It does not hurt sharply like a shock. It only slowly makes you more tired, more bored, more accustomed to not getting what you want. And when that familiarity lasts long enough, you begin to call it reality. You say, life is just like that. Everyone is busy. Change is hard. Later things will be different. But that later rarely arrives because nothing in the present is creating a new trajectory. Recognizing this original fracture is an act of courage because it asks you to stop blaming circumstances and also stop blaming yourself. It asks you to look at the true chain of causes between repeated behavior and the feeling of being stuck. When you look long enough, you will see a very clear truth. Your current life is the logical result of what you do every day, not what you hope. This is not meant to discourage you. It does the opposite. It gives you your power back. Because if results come from habits, then change does not have to start with grand decisions, but with small things built with structure. And when you understand this, you no longer chase explosive inspiration. You begin to chase clarity. Clarity about how you are living. Clarity about the loops that are pulling you down. And clarity that if you do not change the structure, no promise will be strong enough to save you. This part of the journey does not demand that you act immediately. It demands that you face it and look deep enough that you cannot fool yourself anymore. Because only when the original fracture is seen can a new foundation be built. You do not lack potential. You lack a living structure. The difference between these two determines the entire direction of your life. Potential is the ability to become. Structure is what decides whether you actually do. Many people carry intelligence, experience, and aspiration, yet remain stuck because their days are not designed to move them forward. They hope for motivation to arrive someday while their current structure is quietly canceling every effort. The truth is, motivation does not create lasting change. Structure does. When you lack structure, you must use willpower to fight everything, and willpower always gets tired. When you have structure, you do not need to battle constantly because your environment itself is pulling you in the right direction. This is where many people misunderstand. They believe successful people are stronger, more disciplined, or naturally superior. But the real difference is that they do not rely on temporary emotions to decide their actions. They build living frameworks that make the right action easier and the wrong action harder. When you wake up inside a clear structure, you do not need to ask whether you should focus today. The structure has already answered for you. When you live within a designed rhythm, you do not argue with yourself about starting. You simply step into a role that has already been prepared. Structure is how you treat your future with respect. It says you do not wait for inspiration to live correctly. You create a space where the right thing can happen consistently. Many people fear structure because they think it restricts freedom. But the truth is the opposite. The absence of structure is what imprisons you. When everything is random, you are pulled by circumstances, by emotions, by immediate needs. You react more than you choose. Structure frees you from having to repeatedly decide what matters every day. It preserves your energy for choices that truly require intelligence. This central truth also explains why you have tried to change many times yet still return to the same place. You changed goals but kept the same structure. You made new promises but lived in the same old environment. You expected a different result, while the daily signals sent to your brain remained unchanged. The brain does not respond to desire. It responds to repetition. And what is repeated most in your life is how you live each day. When you face this directly, you begin to understand that real change does not start by doing more, but by rearranging. Rearranging your mornings, rearranging your space, rearranging how you use time and energy, rearranging what is allowed to enter your mind each day. This is not glamorous work, it is quiet and sometimes monotonous, but that quiet is the foundation of sustainable strength. Living structure is also how you send a clear message to yourself that you deserve a life with order and depth. When you create structure, you are not just managing time, you are training your brain to believe that you are someone who can lead. Every time you show up on time for a small ritual, every time you complete a defined block of time, every time you protect a boundary, you reinforce a powerful inner belief. The belief that you are reliable. This belief matters more than any affirmation. It does not come from thought, it comes from lived evidence. And that evidence can only be created through structure. When you understand this central truth, you stop searching for miracles. You begin searching for intentional simplicity. You stop asking how to change your life in one day. You start asking which structure needs to be reset today. A better morning. One uninterrupted hour of focus. One small habit held steady. These things seem small, but they carry an irreversible logic. Structure creates behavior. Behavior creates habits. Habits create identity. And identity determines destiny. This is not abstract philosophy. This is a chain of cause and effect operating in your life, whether you recognize it or not. Part 3 of this journey does not ask you to act immediately. It asks you to change how you see. From trying to become a different person to designing a different way of living. When this perspective is set correctly, everything that follows no longer feels heavy. It becomes logical pieces of a new structure gradually taking shape. And when that structure is strong enough, you will no longer need to force yourself forward. You will be carried by the very life you have designed. Every day you live, you are sending signals to your brain. Every repeated action, every familiar choice, every way you respond to pressure is teaching your brain how to keep you exactly where you are. The brain does not distinguish between good or bad, right or wrong. It only learns from what is repeated, and whatever is repeated the most becomes the default. This is why habits have greater power than motivation. Motivation comes and goes, but habits stay and control behavior even when you are not paying attention. When you procrastinate today, the brain learns that procrastination is safe. When you abandon a task, the brain learns that retreat reduces discomfort. When you seek distraction every time heavy emotions appear, the brain learns that avoidance is a form of self-protection. None of this is biologically wrong. The problem begins when short-term survival responses turn into a long-term way of living and slowly erode your future. The quiet law of cause and effect does not operate through punishment. It simply reflects. Your life today is an honest mirror of what you have repeated long enough. Not what you want, not what you dream about, but what you have actually done every day. This truth can feel uncomfortable, but it is also freeing. Because if results come from repetition, you do not need to wait for a major event to change. You only need to change the signal. Every small habit is a vote you cast for the person you are becoming. When you choose to wake up a little earlier, you vote for a more disciplined version of yourself. When you sit with a difficult emotion, instead of running from it, you vote for a more mature version of yourself. When you complete a small task, even when no one is watching you, vote for a more reliable version of yourself. These votes do not create immediate results. And that is why many people quit. They do not see change, so they think they are wasting time. But the quiet law of cause and effect does not operate on the rhythm of emotion. It operates on the rhythm of accumulation. Just as a river is formed from countless small drops no one sees individually, the brain is rewired the same way. Every time you repeat a behavior, a neural pathway is reinforced. At first, it is weak and difficult to follow. But the more you walk it, the more familiar and effortless it becomes. Eventually, you no longer have to try. You simply act. And when behavior becomes automatic, it begins to shape identity. You stop saying, "I am trying to be disciplined." You begin to feel, "I am a disciplined person." This shift is critical because people act most consistently with what they believe about themselves. When you believe you are someone who gives up, your brain will look for reasons to reinforce that belief. When you believe you are someone who keeps commitments, your brain will push you to follow through even when it is hard. The quiet law of cause and effect explains why positive words are not enough if behavior does not change. The brain does not believe empty promises, it believes evidence, and the only evidence it accepts is repeated action. This also means you do not need to do great things to change your identity. You only need to do small things consistently. A little each day. One slightly better choice than yesterday. This is not the fastest path, but it is the most certain one. When you understand this law, you stop chasing instant transformation. You begin to respect the process. You stop dismissing small actions. You know they are rewriting the story inside you. The quiet law of cause and effect also teaches you something else that matters. Every time you break a good habit, you have not failed. You have only missed a vote. What is dangerous is not one slip, but using it as evidence to return to an old identity. Someone who understands this law does not ask how to be perfect. They ask how to return faster. Because every return reinforces a new belief that you are someone who does not quit long term. Part 4 of this journey asks you to look at your life as a stream of signals, without judgment, without self-blame, just observation. What signals are you sending each day? Are you training your brain to be an ally or an obstacle? When you see this clearly, you begin to reclaim choice. You are no longer a victim of circumstances or temporary emotions. You become the designer of signals. And when the signals change, the results sooner or later will follow. This is the foundation of all lasting transformation. Quiet, undramatic, but irreversible. Not because you are ready to be perfect, but because you are tired of repeating the same old loop. This is when you turn around and look directly at who you are being rather than who you want to appear as on the outside. You look at how you use your time, how you react when pressure appears, how you seek distraction whenever emotions become heavy. No avoidance, no justification, no familiar story about difficult circumstances or other people being the cause. You simply look. This direct looking can feel uncomfortable because it forces you to admit that many things in your life did not happen randomly. They are the logical result of how you have lived long enough. Yet within that discomfort, a new energy begins to form. The energy of personal responsibility. Not responsibility as self-blame, but responsibility as maturity. Responsibility that says, if results come from choices, then new choices can create different results. When you look honestly at yourself, you begin to notice key moments that have been skipped every day. Moments that are very small yet decisive. The moment you choose to stay with a task for a few more minutes or walk away. The moment you choose to keep a small commitment or break it because it feels easier. The moment you choose to say no to a distraction or allow it to enter and take over your focus. Before, you did not notice these moments because they seemed too small. But when you begin to look with awareness, you see that they are shaping the entire trajectory of your life. Looking directly at yourself also means accepting an important truth. You cannot change what you refuse to see. Every effort at personal growth fails if you only focus on becoming better without understanding how you are actually operating. Understanding here does not mean overanalyzing, but honest observation. You observe when your energy drops. You observe what triggers procrastination. You observe which environments weaken you and which ones make you clearer. This observation is not meant to judge. It is meant to collect living data, because your life itself is the most honest laboratory. As you begin collecting this data, you realize that many of your behaviors do not come from conscious choice but from reflex, and reflexes can be retrained, but only when you see them. Part 5 marks a shift from vagueness to clarity. Before, you felt generally unmotivated. Now you begin to see specifics. You see that you often lose focus during certain time windows. You see that you quit more easily when no one is watching. You see that you use busyness to avoid facing a deeper question about meaning. These discoveries do not weaken you. They strengthen you because they give you a map. Without a map, you can only chase emotions. With a map, you can redesign the journey. Looking directly at yourself is also when you let go of old stories you have told for too long. The story that this is just who you are. The story that age has decided everything. The story that you missed your moment. When you look through data instead of stories, you realize that many limiting beliefs are simply conclusions drawn from a certain phase of life rather than unchangeable truths. You have quit before does not mean you are a quitter. You have been unfocused before does not mean you cannot focus. These things only show that you have been living inside a structure that did not fit, and structure can be rebuilt. But rebuilding begins only when you stop covering cracks with vague hope and start looking at the real foundation. This part of the journey does not bring excitement, it brings quiet, a quiet that is necessary for you to hear your true inner voice. Not the voice pushing you to succeed faster, but the voice asking one simple question: if you continue living as you are now, do you respect yourself? This question is not meant to make you feel guilty, it is meant to awaken inner dignity. When you no longer want to betray yourself in small things, you have stepped into a different level of maturity. From here, you no longer seek change to prove anything to others. You seek change to live in alignment with what you know is right. And this shift in motive makes every action that follows more stable. Looking directly at yourself is also when you realize you do not need to fix everything at once. You only need to begin with truth. The truth about where you are standing, the truth about how you have been living, and the truth that you still have time if you are willing to live differently starting now. Part 5 ends not with a specific plan but with a new state, a state of clarity. When you clearly see where you are, you stop running in circles. You begin to walk with intention, and from this foundation, every next part of the journey will no longer feel like scattered advice. They become logical steps of someone who is ready to take responsibility for their own life. You are not asked to imagine a perfect version without fatigue or mistakes. You are only invited to see a version that is more consistent, more calm, and more reliable. That version does not live an easier life. They simply live a life with more structure. When you imagine the future this way, it no longer feels like a distant dream. It becomes a logical outcome. If you show up every day even without enthusiasm, if you keep small commitments even when no one is checking, if you return after each slip instead of turning it into a reason to quit, that version does not need miracles to exist. They only need your present self to stop sabotaging itself. Imagining the future here is not daydreaming. It is a training tool. When you lack a clear image, your brain does not know where it is going. And when it does not know the destination, it returns to what is familiar. Clear visualization creates a pull. It gives the brain a reason to tolerate short-term discomfort. When you know what you are building, you stop seeing small actions as meaningless. You see them as bricks. No single brick creates a house instantly, but missing a foundational one will weaken the entire structure. This future version is not defined first by external achievements, it is defined by inner states. The feeling of waking up without running from the day, the feeling of ending the day without carrying self-blame, the feeling of knowing you did what you said you would do. These feelings do not come from big success, they come from quiet consistency. When you imagine this version, you begin to realize that the distance between you and them is not 5 or 10 years. It is very small choices made today. That distance is measured by whether you protect your morning, whether you dare to shut off a distraction, whether you stay a few more minutes with a difficult task. The future is not built from rare major decisions. It is built from repeated choices you usually overlook. Visualizing the future version also changes how you see failure. Instead of seeing each slip as evidence that you are not good enough, you begin to see it as data. The future version is not someone who never fell. They are someone who learned to stand back up faster, and with less drama. When you imagine this, you stop fearing mistakes. You only fear not returning. This is a crucial shift. It frees you from the pressure to be perfect. It allows you to move forward with patience. This future version also does not live to prove anything to the world. They live with inner clarity. They know what they are doing and why. This clarity does not always come with strong emotion. Sometimes it is very quiet. But that quiet is the sign of stable inner strength. When you hold this image long enough, it begins to influence present behavior. You start asking what that version would choose in this situation, not to pressure yourself, but to orient yourself. This question is powerful because it lifts you out of temporary emotion and places you into a longer timeline. You no longer live only for today. You live for trajectory. Part 6 of this journey helps you understand that you do not need to become that version right now. You only need to act as if you are becoming them. Each small action aligned with that image is a step forward, and each step reinforces the belief that you are moving in the right direction. This belief is not based on hope. It is based on lived evidence. When you have seen yourself show up enough times, you begin to believe you are someone you can rely on. This is the foundation of all lasting confidence. Not affirmations in the mirror, but your own history of action. Part 6 ends when you understand that the future is not something waiting for you ahead. It is being built right now in every small choice. When you accept this, you no longer feel left behind. You know that as long as you still have choices, you still have the ability to change direction. And from this point, the journey is no longer about searching for motivation. It becomes about living in alignment with the version you have already seen clearly in your mind. How you begin your morning does not only determine your mood for the first few hours, it sets the rhythm for your entire nervous system. When you open your eyes and immediately allow the outside world to rush in your hand over leadership of your day to circumstances, messages, notifications, urgent work, other people's emotions, all flood in before you are fully present. And when a day begins in a pulled state, it almost guarantees you will continue to be pulled until night. Morning is not a time to do many things. It is a time to establish a role, the role of the leader or the role of the reactor. When you use the first minutes intentionally, you send a powerful signal to your brain that you are the one in control. This does not require complex rituals. It requires respect. Respect for morning energy, respect for the rare quiet before the world begins to demand. A well-protected morning does not need to be long. It needs to be clear. Clear that this time is non-negotiable. Clear that you choose what enters your mind first. When you sit quietly for a few minutes to breathe, when you write an intention for the day, when you choose one important task before everything else, you are shaping priority. This priority is not about controlling everything. It is about reminding yourself that you have choice. Many people believe they do not have time for an intentional morning, but the truth is they are paying for not having one with a full day of chaos. A reactive morning often leads to a fragmented day, and a fragmented day repeated long enough becomes a fragmented life. Morning is where you interrupt that loop. When you do one small intentional act at the start of the day, you create momentum. This momentum is not explosive energy. It is the feeling that you started correctly. That feeling matters because it reduces friction for the actions that follow. When you keep a promise to yourself in the morning, it becomes easier to keep promises throughout the day. When you complete one small thing, it becomes easier to complete the next. Morning, therefore, is not just time. It is a declaration of identity. You are telling yourself that you are someone who does not wait for emotion to act. You are someone who acts and lets emotion follow. This is especially important for adults carrying many responsibilities. You cannot control every variable in your day, but you can control how you enter it, and that control is enough to create significant difference over time. An intentional morning also reduces your dependence on motivation. When the ritual is set, you do not need to ask whether you feel like it today. You simply step into the role. That role is built through repetition. At first it may feel awkward, but over time it becomes natural. And when the right thing becomes natural, you no longer waste energy arguing with yourself. Morning is also where you plant the seeds of focus. When you choose not to engage with distractions at the beginning, you teach your brain that not every stimulus requires a reaction. This ability to delay reaction is the foundation of deep focus, and deep focus is the rarest asset in the modern world. Part 7 of this journey does not ask you to change your entire schedule. It asks you to protect a very small space with enormous meaning. A space where you belong to yourself before you belong to anyone else. When you do this long enough, morning stops being something you have to defend. It becomes a place you return to in order to reset order each day. And when inner order is set correctly at the start of the day, the rest of the journey becomes much easier. Not because life becomes less difficult, but because you have entered the day in the posture of someone who leads. Not big distractions, but small, constant ones that seem harmless. Every time you check an unnecessary notification, every time your mind drifts to another thought while working, you are not just losing a few seconds, you are weakening your ability to be present. Focus does not disappear in a single moment. It is eroded little by little until you become accustomed to a scattered state and call it normal. The problem is not that the world is too noisy, but that you have become used to opening the door to everything at once. When you do not set boundaries for attention, you allow others to decide the value of your time. Focus is not something you find when you have enough motivation. It is something you protect through clear decisions. You cannot focus if you are not willing to say no. No to things that are not bad but not necessary. No to immediate reaction. No to the feeling that you must always be available. When you protect focus, you are protecting the capacity for deep thinking. And deep thinking is what allows you to solve complex problems, make sound decisions, and feel meaning in what you do. Without deep thinking, life becomes a sequence of disconnected tasks. You stay busy, but you do not move forward. Protecting focus begins with recognizing that attention is a finite resource. Each day you only have a limited amount. If you spend it on things that do not create value, there will be nothing left for what matters. This requires courage, because sometimes protecting focus makes you different. You may respond more slowly. You may miss a few unimportant things, but in return, you gain depth. And depth always produces superior results over time. When you step into an uninterrupted block of focused work, you send a clear signal to the brain that this is the time to be fully present. At first, the brain will resist because it is used to constant stimulation. You will feel restless. You will feel the urge to check something else. But if you stay long enough, that resistance softens. And when it softens, you enter a very different state. A state where time moves quickly but is not empty. A state where you feel you are truly doing something meaningful. This state does not only increase performance, it nourishes inner dignity. You feel that you are living with intention rather than merely existing. Part 8 of this journey asks you to look again at how you are spending your attention. Not to blame yourself, only to notice. To notice that every time you choose focus, you are choosing the future. And every time you surrender to distraction, you are handing that future to things that do not matter. When you begin to protect focus as a living boundary, you do not need to work more. You only need to work less but deeper. And in the modern world, that is the greatest advantage you can create for yourself. This is where you learn to do hard things every day, not to prove anything to anyone, but to train your own inner strength. The world is not short of people with good ideas, big dreams, and hidden potential. What is rare are people with enough inner endurance to stay with difficulty when there is no instant reward. Every time you avoid a hard task, you may feel brief relief, but you are sending your brain a dangerous message that discomfort must be avoided at all costs. When that message is repeated long enough, the brain begins pulling you away from every challenge the moment heaviness appears. This is how a fragile identity is formed. In contrast, every time you choose to stay with something difficult, even for a few extra minutes, you are training your nervous system to tolerate pressure without collapsing. You are teaching your brain that discomfort does not equal danger. When the brain learns this, a new door opens. You begin doing things you once believed you could not. Training endurance does not mean punishing yourself. It means choosing a challenge that is just enough each day and completing it with awareness. One hard but clear task. One task that does not feel exciting but earns self-respect. When you complete such a task, you gain more than an external result. You gain internal evidence that you are someone who can endure difficulty without running away. This evidence matters because it builds real confidence. Not confidence from praise or big achievements, but confidence from personal history. A history that says you stayed. Many people misunderstand motivation. They believe inspiration must come before hard work. The truth is, inspiration usually comes after action, not before. When you begin doing hard work, the brain will resist because it is unfamiliar. But if you continue, that resistance turns into focus. And when focus deepens, you experience a different kind of satisfaction. The satisfaction of overcoming yourself. This feeling is far more durable than the short-term pleasure of distraction. Training endurance also changes your relationship with fear. Instead of seeing fear as a stop signal, you begin seeing it as a sign that you are standing at the edge of expansion. This does not make you reckless. It makes you clear. You learn to distinguish between real danger and necessary discomfort. Many things you once labeled as dangerous were simply the discomfort of leaving what is familiar. As you train this way each day, your comfort zone begins to expand. Tasks that once stressed you become normal. Tasks you once delayed become more approachable. This is a quiet but powerful evolution. Part 9 of this journey also emphasizes that you do not need to choose massive challenges. You need to choose the right hard things. The right hard thing aligns with your direction and can be repeated. It may be a daily deep focus block, a consistent physical practice, a commitment to writing or learning without interruption. What matters is not the size of the challenge, but the consistency of facing it. When you do hard things every day, you build a very different identity. The identity of someone who does not wait for things to be easy before beginning. That person does not need to appear strong. Their strength comes from familiarity with pressure, and when pressure becomes familiar, it no longer controls you. You can remain calm in situations that once caused panic. You can keep moving when others stop, not because you are better, but because you have trained. Training endurance also delivers a deeper benefit. It helps you trust your own word. Every time you complete a hard task, you strengthen the relationship between you and yourself. This relationship is the foundation of self-respect. When you trust yourself, you no longer need constant validation. You do not need to prove anything. You simply continue living in alignment with what you have chosen. Part 9 ends with a subtle shift. You stop asking how to avoid difficulty. You begin asking which difficulty is worth facing today. This question transforms how you enter each day. You are no longer passive in the face of challenge. You actively choose it. And when you choose difficulty instead of running from it, you step into a rare level of freedom. The freedom of someone who knows they can endure and overcome far more than they once believed. Many people believe confidence comes from achieving big goals or receiving recognition from others. But the deeper truth is that the brain only trusts you when you keep your word to yourself. Every time you start something and leave it unfinished, you do not just lose an external result. You weaken your inner relationship. The brain records that your promises are unreliable, and when this doubt accumulates, you begin to feel insecure even when you are capable. In contrast, every time you complete something, even something small, you send a very clear message that you are reliable. This message does not need to be spoken. It is engraved through action. Completion is how you build credibility with yourself, and this credibility is the foundation of lasting confidence. Not loud confidence, but quiet confidence. The kind of confidence that allows you to stand firmly without display. Many people stay stuck because they constantly chase new tasks, new ideas, new plans. They start with excitement, but abandon things once the novelty fades. Each time this happens, they look for something else to begin, and the loop continues for years. The problem is not a lack of creativity. The problem is an unwillingness to stay until the end. Staying until the end is not always comfortable. The middle phase of any journey is dry and demands patience. But it is precisely this phase that builds identity. When you learn to complete, you train your brain to tolerate boredom without quitting. This is an extremely important skill in the modern world, where everything is designed for fast stimulation. Completion also changes how you see goals. Instead of setting goals that are too big and vague, you begin breaking them down into tasks with clear endpoints. The brain needs an endpoint to feel safe and satisfied. When you complete a small task, you create a positive feedback loop. You see yourself moving forward. That feeling motivates you to continue. This is how real motivation is created. Not from positive thinking, but from concrete progress. Part 10 also emphasizes that completion does not mean perfection. Completion means finishing well enough. Many people procrastinate because they want everything to be perfect. But perfectionism is often just avoidance in disguise. When you wait for everything to be perfect, you rarely begin and almost never finish. Someone who understands completion knows the first version does not need to be excellent. It needs to exist. Improvement can only happen after existence. When you allow yourself to complete even imperfectly, you release the flow of creativity and progress. Completion also delivers another deep benefit: clarity. An unfinished task always occupies space in your mind. It creates a vague sense of heaviness. When you complete it, you free mental energy. You gain space to think about what comes next with greater clarity. That is why completion is not just discipline. It is mental hygiene. Part 10 of this journey asks you to change the familiar question. Instead of asking how to start, ask how to finish. Instead of asking whether you have enough inspiration, ask whether you can complete the next step. This question brings you back to the present. It reduces pressure. It turns a long journey into a series of manageable steps. When you complete enough small tasks, you begin building a very different personal history. A history of someone who does not leave things unfinished. And this history quietly changes how you approach every challenge afterward. You no longer doubt yourself as much as before. You know that even when it is hard, you can reach the end. Part 10 ends with a very clear truth. Confidence does not come from thinking you are strong. It comes from having repeatedly witnessed yourself keep your word, and every completion, no matter how small, places another brick in that foundation. When the foundation is strong enough, you no longer need to talk about confidence. It will be present in how you work, how you decide, and how you face life. Many adults feel exhausted not because they do too much, but because they consume too much. They consume information, consume emotions, consume other people's stories until the mind no longer has space to hear its own voice. When you continuously take in without creating, you gradually lose your sense of agency. You become a spectator in your own life. You follow other people's thoughts, other people's achievements, other people's pace of living, and unconsciously use them as a measure for yourself. This creates a deep inner misalignment. You live, but you do not lead. Shifting from consumption to creation does not require you to become an artist or a content producer. It requires you to begin contributing. Contribution can be very simple. Writing down your thoughts, building a skill, solving a problem, creating specific value instead of only absorbing. When you create even something small, you change your inner position. You are no longer only reacting to the world. You begin to affect it. This feeling is fundamentally different. It generates energy instead of draining it. Many people do not realize that constant consumption creates a deep form of mental fatigue. You are always receiving but rarely processing. The mind becomes overloaded yet unclear. When you begin to create, you are forced to slow down. You must select. You must organize your thinking. This process is like cleaning the inside. It brings order, and that order makes you feel that you are living with greater depth. Part 11 also asks you to reconsider your relationship with information. Not all information is harmful. The issue is consuming without intention. When you consume to escape emptiness, you become more empty. When you consume to serve creation, you begin to feel sufficient. The difference lies in the direction of energy. The consumer pours energy outward. The creator gathers energy and transforms it into value. When you step into the role of creator, you do not wait for inspiration. You work with what is available. You learn to show up consistently, and it is this consistency that forms a new identity, the identity of a contributor. This identity is powerful because it does not depend on immediate recognition. You create because that is how you live, not to be seen. When you create long enough, you begin to believe that you have something worth offering. This belief matters because it reduces the need for comparison. You no longer look at other people's lives to evaluate yourself. You focus on your own path. Part 11 also emphasizes that creation does not need to be grand. It needs to be real. An honest page of writing, an improved solution, a small but consistent act of contribution. These things accumulate into a very different sense of self. You are no longer someone who only reacts. You are someone who shapes trajectory. When you make this role shift, you begin to feel meaning in small things. You see that each day can leave a mark if you choose to create rather than only consume. Part 11 ends when you realize that life is not shaped by what you watch, hear, or follow, but by what you choose to make. When you choose to create, you step out of the audience. You step onto your own stage. And from here, personal growth is no longer about accumulating more knowledge. It becomes about living fully in the role of the architect of your own life. The body is not just a vehicle that carries you through the day. It is the biological foundation of every mental state. When the body is sluggish, tense, or suppressed for too long, the mind becomes dull, reactive, and unfocused. Many people try to change their thinking without touching the body. They blame themselves for lacking motivation while their nervous system is overloaded. When you move your body, you are not just burning energy, you are resetting the rhythm of the entire system. Breathing deepens, circulation improves, and the brain receives the signal that the body is safe and ready. From this state, clarity becomes far more accessible. Movement does not need to be complex or long. What matters is consistency. A body that is activated daily sends a very different message than a body trapped in a chair and a screen. That message says you are alive, not merely existing. When you move, you break stagnation. And stagnation is what makes many people feel heavy without knowing why. Part 12 also emphasizes the two-way relationship between body and mind. The mind affects the body, but the body also leads the mind. When you stand upright, open your shoulders, and breathe deeply, you feel different. When the body remains contracted for a long time, the mind contracts with it. Movement, therefore, is not just health maintenance. It is an act of identity reconstruction. Every time you move, you are telling yourself that this body deserves care. That care accumulates into self-respect. And self-respect creates natural discipline. When you respect your body, you more easily respect your time and energy. Many people wait for motivation before exercising, but motivation rarely comes before action. When you move first, motivation follows. This is a biological principle, not a motivational slogan. Movement releases chemicals in the brain that improve mood and focus. But the deeper benefit is that you are building a ritual. This ritual becomes an anchor in your day. When everything feels chaotic, you still have a stable point to return to. Part 12 also invites you to reconsider your relationship with fatigue. Not all fatigue is bad. There is fatigue that comes from passive living and fatigue that comes from using energy correctly. Fatigue after movement often carries a pleasant quality. It helps you sleep deeper and think more clearly. When you learn to distinguish these two, you stop avoiding movement. You begin to seek it as a form of renewal. Activating the body daily also strengthens the identity of someone who is proactive. You no longer let emotions decide action. You act to lead emotion. This reversal is critical. It helps you feel that you have influence over your inner state, rather than being controlled by it. Part 12 ends when you understand that caring for the body is not secondary. It is central to a life lived with intention. When the body is activated, the mind awakens. And when the mind awakens, every other effort of personal growth finally has ground to take root, not to overanalyze and not to judge, but to see clearly. Many people live their entire lives without ever truly observing their inner world. They feel emotions but do not understand them. They think constantly but rarely know what they are thinking or why. When you do not look inward, you are easily pulled by unconscious reactions. Writing is the simplest and most powerful way to break that loop. When you write, you are forced to slow down. You are forced to turn vague inner noise into clear language. And that very process creates distance between you and your emotions. That distance does not make you cold, it makes you clear. When you put thoughts onto the page, you are no longer swept away by them. You begin to see them as observable phenomena. This gives you a profound form of power. The power to choose response instead of reflex. Writing does not need to be beautiful or correct. It needs to be honest. Write to understand yourself, not to impress anyone. When you write about your day, you begin to notice recurring patterns. When you write about a difficult emotion, you begin to see deeper causes. When you write about a decision, you begin to clarify the values guiding you. These insights are difficult to access through thinking alone because the mind tends to loop. Writing creates a straight line. Part 13 also emphasizes that you cannot change what you cannot name. When an emotion is unnamed, it tends to control behavior from behind the scenes. When you write and name it, you bring it into the light. And once in the light, it loses much of its controlling power. You no longer say, "I feel bad." You begin to say, "I am feeling disappointed because my expectations were not met." That difference is enormous. It turns emotion from a vague mass into information that can be processed. Writing is also how you build a relationship with yourself. Every time you sit down and listen to your own thoughts, you send a message that this inner voice matters. When you do this consistently, you begin to trust your intuition more. You become less dependent on external opinions. You gain an inner anchor. Part 13 of this journey does not require you to write long entries. It requires you to write consistently. A few lines each day are enough to create a significant difference over time. What matters is honesty and continuity. When you write regularly, you begin to see yourself more clearly. And when you see yourself more clearly, you make better decisions. Better decisions lead to more consistent action, and consistent action reinforces identity. Writing, therefore, is not only a tool for reflection, it is a tool for construction. You are rewriting your inner narrative one line at a time. Part 13 ends when you realize that clarity does not come from having all the answers. It comes from being willing to sit with the right questions. And writing is how you hold space for those questions long enough to lead you to answers that are truly your own. Not talent, not inspiration, but the ability to return. Many people quit not because they are weak, but because they believe in a false standard. They believe that if they slip once, everything is ruined. They believe that if something is not done perfectly, it is better not to do it at all. This belief creates a subtle trap. It makes you either push intensely for a short time or quit entirely when you fail to match the ideal image in your head. Consistency breaks this trap with a very different rule. You do not need to be perfect. You need to return. Every time you return after a day out of rhythm, you send a powerful message to your brain that you do not abandon yourself. This message matters more than any streak of perfect days because it builds resilience. Resilience is what allows you to go long. No one lives a life of growth in a straight line. Every real journey has dips. What separates those who go far from those who stop is not how many times they slip, but how quickly they return. When you understand this, you stop magnifying mistakes. You stop turning one bad day into a story about who you are. You see it as just a day, and the next day is still open. Consistency also requires simplification. Many people fail because they set too many standards at once. They want to change everything immediately. When they cannot, they feel overwhelmed and quit. Those who practice consistency choose a few core things and hold them long enough. They understand that one small habit held steadily creates more change than 10 big habits abandoned halfway. When you simplify, you reduce friction. When friction is reduced, the ability to return increases. This is how sustainable momentum is built. Consistency also teaches a healthy relationship with time. You no longer live under pressure to change quickly. You live with the belief that showing up each day is progress, even if small. This belief calms impatience. It allows you to focus on doing today correctly instead of obsessing over distant outcomes. When you show up consistently, you begin to notice something interesting. Things that once required effort start to feel natural. You no longer have to force yourself as much. This does not happen because you are stronger, but because the brain has learned a new path. Consistency is the glue that binds scattered efforts into a coherent identity. Without consistency, every effort is just a brief spark. With consistency, they become a current. Part 14 also emphasizes that returning is a skill that must be trained. The first time you return after slipping, it will feel difficult. The ego will whisper that it is too late, that it no longer matters. But if you return that time, the next returns become easier. You are training the brain to accept imperfection while continuing forward. This is a rare and powerful skill. It prevents temporary emotion from deciding long-term direction. When you possess this skill, you no longer fear failure. You only fear not returning. And that fear is healthy because it keeps you loyal to the journey. Consistency also changes how you view success. Success is no longer a distant destination. It becomes a side effect of showing up long enough. You do not need to ask when you will succeed. You only need to ask whether you will return today. This question is simple but powerful. It brings you back to the present. It turns a vast journey into a small choice you can make now. Part 14 ends when you understand that destiny is not decided by rare, explosive moments. It is decided by your ability to return on ordinary days. When you build consistency, you do not need to change your life overnight. Life will change with you day by day. And when you look back, you will not remember the perfect days. You will remember that you did not quit. There are no drums, no lights, no grand declarations. There are only you and the quiet decision that from today you will no longer live by the old inertia. You have moved through awakening, seen the root fracture, understood structure, understood the quiet law of cause and effect, faced yourself, envisioned the future, protected the morning, guarded focus, trained endurance, completed what you started, shifted from consumption to creation, activated the body, reflected inward, and held consistency. All of this was not meant to turn you into someone else. It was meant to return you to your rightful position, the position of the one who steers. You do not need to wait for life to give you permission to change. You do not need to wait for a big sign. You already have enough data, enough experience, enough understanding to know that if you continue living the same way, the results will not be different. And you have also seen clearly that change does not come from doing more, but from living with intention. This ending does not ask you to do everything at once. It asks you to choose one thing and hold it today, then tomorrow, then the day after. Not because it is easy, but because it is right. When you choose this, you step through a door that many people stand before but never walk through. The door of quiet personal responsibility. No one applauds when you wake a little earlier. No one acknowledges when you shut off a distraction or complete a small task. But your brain records it. Your life records it. And those records accumulate into something very rare: self-respect. When you respect yourself, you do not need to try to appear strong. Strength shows up naturally in how you walk, speak, decide, and stay with what is difficult. You also do not need to worry excessively about the future, because you know that each day you are sending the right signals, and those signals sooner or later will create a new trajectory. Part 15 does not close with a big promise. It closes with a very real reminder. You do not need to become the best version of yourself right now. You only need to not betray yourself today. Just keep one small commitment. Just return when you slip. Just keep showing up. If you do that, life will change quietly but irreversibly. 1 year from now, when you look back, you will not remember every single day, but you will realize that you are no longer the same person. Not because you tried harder than others, but because you lived more honestly with what you knew was right. And that is how a life is rewritten, not by miracles, but by choices repeated every day. You have reached the end of this journey, and if you are still here, it means a very deep part of you is ready to live differently. What you have just heard is not a momentary motivational speech. It is a map that helps you look honestly at how you are living, understand why you were once stuck, and more importantly, see clearly the path out. You have seen that change does not come from explosive inspiration but from the right living structure. You have understood the power of small choices repeated every day, from how you start your morning, how you protect, focus, train, endurance, complete, what you begin, shift from consumption to creation, activate the body, reflect inward, maintain consistency. All of this is not meant to turn you into someone else, but to return you to the position of the one who leads their own life. If this story touched you, remember that you do not need to change everything today. You only need to keep one small commitment and not betray yourself in what matters. If you found this content valuable, please press like to support the channel. Share this video with those who may need this message, and do not forget to subscribe to continue walking alongside deeper inspirational stories in future videos. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and may you have the